All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us for Talent Grind's Meet My Network podcast. I am Michael Doran, and I'm joined today by Brian. How do you pronounce your last name, Brian?
Piotrowski.
Piotrowski. Gotcha. I'm joined by Brian Piotrowski, who is actually from my old hometown, Chicago, Illinois. He is the director of talent acquisition for EXP, which is an engineering consulting business, but not software engineering, more like infrastructure, real world building things type of engineering. And he's had a very interesting career. He's actually had longevity in his career that I think a lot of recruiters would give their left teeth for. So, Brian, welcome to the Meet My Network podcast. Great to meet you.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Michael.
Absolutely. So I think just to start off here, like why recruiting? What initially drew you to recruiting as a career?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And when I left university, my undergraduate degree was in political science and religion. I honestly thought I was going to be working in Washington, D.C. as a government bureaucrat working on Capitol Hill, and then quickly realized that dream was not going to happen. And a staffing firm reached out to me called Delta Technical Solutions, asking if I would be interested in coming to work for them. They are a small boutique staffing firm that is based here in the Chicago suburbs that focuses on manufacturing positions.
Gotcha. So that drew you into it, just like that more than the sales part of it right away.
Yeah, and it was a full desk. So everything from business development and recruiting, I did everything while I was there. Spent about 3 years there and definitely enjoy the recruiting aspect, finding people, getting them interested in a role, finding out what makes them passionate about their profession and what makes them different from everybody else. And really, that's where I started to really enjoy what I was doing at that time.
Gotcha. Then you spent a little bit of time at Veolia before you headed over to EXP, correct?
Correct. So I was on contract at Veolia North America. I came over there. I left staffing and came over to Veolia to work on their water side. So Veolia has an operation and maintenance contract with municipalities and industrial facilities for water and wastewater facilities. So I supported that business for 11 months while I was on contract. And then through that entire time I was on contract, never knew if I was going to go permanent or not. So I was always looking and I had an opportunity at EXP. So I decided to take the opportunity and move over.
Certainly seemed like that was the right decision to make. And it seems like you've really developed your career at EXP. So I'm really curious about, well, how was it that you were able to transition from being an individual contributor? It looks like you were a team lead for a little bit and then promoted into management and then ultimately to a director. Is there any specific thing that you attribute being able to give that opportunity to move into leadership?
I think that I was fortunate to be in the right place at the right time is one of them. But one of the other things is I was always curious and I always wanted to learn more. I was at the time the only recruiter in the US taking on all openings. When I started there, I was told there'd be no more than 35 recs at any time I would be handling. That quickly ballooned to 70. And it was much, but I learned a lot. I had really great people around me. I was able to work with some really fascinating people and very smart people when I first came into EXP. But I was always curious and I was always asking more questions and always learning to see what was next, what more can we be doing? And that kind of constant curiosity helped me have my manager notice me, I felt like, at least at that time.
Gotcha. Then moving up to management, according to your LinkedIn profile, you had 4 leads and 9 recruiters underneath you. So that's a pretty substantial recruiting organization. Was there what was the most surprising thing that you learned as you started transition from being a recruiter into a recruiting leader?
People come to you a lot more with problems and questions that you don't know if you're the right person to answer that sometimes, especially right in the beginning, you have an imposter syndrome that happens. What makes me better than anybody else, or why was I the one that was selected? But quickly, I started to learn so much more about different things that were going on. I started to oversee US and Canadian recruitment as well at that time. Um, I quickly found that I didn't have to know all the answers, but I could rely on my team and ask them as well and start collecting that information from them as well to help answer bigger questions that the business might have.
Okay. Well, was there a skill that you had wished that you had developed earlier that would have eased that transition for you?
Maybe not necessarily a skill, but I would call it more of a characteristic, being ready to ask questions from my peers and as well as from my reporting staff as well immediately. And the reason I say that is right away, when I came into management, I think we didn't really understand. I didn't understand what I was getting into. I didn't understand all the questions that were going to come to me. I didn't understand a lot of different things. I was never getting formal training, and just start asking some of my reporting staff as well. I think would have been a lot more helpful in the beginning. I think it made me excel. So for example, if there's a question of, hey, why aren't we finding the right people, or why aren't we, if we're struggling a little bit in a role, just making sure that I have all the answers instead of just looking at the ATS and saying, oh, I don't know. Just being okay with just taking a step back and coming and then going back to the managers and looking and getting all the answers.
Gotcha. Is there a function or a particular role that you really most enjoy recruiting for?
There's a lot of roles or functions. I work in an engineering and consulting capacity. I absolutely love working on all the engineering positions we have. I think there's always going to be positions that are always really challenging and definitely that always stick out. But all the engineering positions are always a lot of fun that I really enjoy recruiting on.
And how big is your recruiting organization now?
So I have three regional managers currently. I have one for the US, one for Quebec. If you're not familiar with Quebec, um, French is a very important part of the
Right.
language there. And then there's a lot of legislative rules around recruiting in Quebec as well, that I didn't know. And then I have a quote unquote an English speaking Canada manager as well. So there's managers in those three regions. And then I have, so there's three. So I have 12 other recruiters as well, and a coordinator.
Oh, wow. So looking at your overall recruiting organization holistically, like how do you define success?
Being a professional service organization is definitely, utilization is a very key important thing. And this is for us as an organization, as we try to work on these projects that we keep having. We want to make sure that our staff is being fully utilized, but also we are not burning out our staff. So workforce planning is going to be a really big, important focus for us here coming up. But for us, the success is getting people in as quickly as possible and working out projects immediately as well. So for us, we do look at how many hires are coming in through the door at any given point. We do know when our busy season is, and we do start to prepare for that as well. But for us, we do look at hires per quarter, per month, and per week as well for the recruiters, just to make sure that we're on track to help fill some of the roles that we have.
Oh, that makes sense. So I'm curious, from your perspective, how has the recruiting landscape changed in the last, let's say, 3 years or so?
Yeah, that's a really good question. We came out of COVID where everybody was looking for a new role. We had the great resignation at that time. Everybody was looking, and now people are a lot more in the last 3 years. They're looking for stability now. I think from our standpoint, the industry that I think has an unemployment rate still under 1%, in the engineering fields. Everybody's busy. So everybody's looking for stability. Everybody wants longevity right now. So that's in my field, really what we're seeing that is the biggest change.
What technologies or approaches are you most excited about that are developing in recruiting?
Yeah, everybody's talking about AI right now. There's so much out there, and there's just so much that we don't know. I think we're starting to see I'm just starting to get a grasp of what technologies we can be using to interview candidates and what type of large language models there are out there. This year, I've already been reached out to, and some companies have reached out to me just specifically on tools in interviewing. The things that I think are going to be I'm most excited about as well, though, I think is going to be tools that help us measure quality of hire and longevity and understanding that. And we're starting to see tools that are really good with that too, to be able to understand what a good quality of hire is, and always has data and metrics and has taken other things. What is your utilization rate? What is your success on projects? What does it look like? What is your success rate on these projects? Are you getting them delivered on time? Are we taking any change orders? Or are we, all those factors are being considered into what a quality of hire looks like short and long term.
Cool. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, especially quality of hire. That's an interesting kind of, I think, data point that a lot of companies are still trying to figure out right now.
Right.
And I look at quality of hire as not just necessarily on the recruiting organization shoulders, but also on the overall leadership of the company's shoulders. Any thoughts
Exactly.
about that?
No, I completely agree with you as well, because we could bring somebody in, but if we're not setting them up for success either, they're going to fail as an employee as well. We don't want that. The last thing we want is somebody to come in here and fail as well.
Yeah, I remember at one job I had this one manager who was very difficult. And the fourth time that I had to fill this position on her team after 18 months, I finally went into the HR director and I'm like, listen, there is an issue here. I'm constantly having to fill this position. I bring qualified candidates in. They're not lasting more than 6 months. They were not receptive to that. At the time. This was obviously maybe early 2000s kind of sort of time period, but we're not really receptive. And I just remember thinking to myself at that time, it can't all be on the recruiter's shoulders. Once we get them in the door, we're pretty much done, right? That's very objective. So that's an interesting perspective on that. As you grow your team, I'm really curious, like what qualities do you look for when you're hiring recruiters?
I really want somebody that is curious, engaged in what's going on outside of the industry, engaged what's going on inside the industry as well, reading on what's going on, attending conferences, learning as much as they can. That's really important to me because if you're just stuck, things are going to change so quickly in the next couple of years. And if you're not staying up with the times, you will be falling back behind. And I think that's where those are the people that will get replaced by AI or any type of technology that's coming through.
Do you have any concerns about AI in recruiting?
Right. I mean, it's hard to say. I think from my perspective, right now, no, I don't have any concerns because I think from what I'm seeing, it's going to help us have a clear path forward within in recruiting. I think the candidate experience should get better. I think the hiring manager experience should get better. The recruiter's experience should be getting better. All of this process. There's no reasons pretty soon that we should be ghosting candidates. But I think for the next 5, 10 years, I think it's going to be an interesting time. And I think it'll be a lot of fun, I think, in the recruiting space as well, because we'll all be learning with this as well.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. The big debate that I've been having on my live streams and talking with other people, I feel that there's two different types of people when it comes to AI. There's the doomers who think that AI is just going to take all of our jobs. And there's companies like AI out there who are supposedly creating a 5-stage AI recruiter that's going to be able to do all of our jobs. I'm more of an AI boomer. Yeah, the way I look at it, I think that AI is going to really get rid of that barrier to entry for people to create even products, create new businesses, create new companies. And just like engineers have been getting rich over the last few years, kind of creating platforms that have been touching the world, I feel that's going to be opened up to so many more creative people that has been happening today. And I really do posit that, right?
Agree.
I think this cycle that we're living in with these companies that grow to 50, 60, 150,000 people and they're hiring people, they're laying off recruiters and they're hiring people and laying off recruiters. It's left a bad taste in my mouth. It certainly has been extremely disruptive for the recruiting community. I'm much more in favor of this, of what I see happening with some startups where they hire one full-time recruiter. They augment them with services companies like mine who can come in and do sourcing top of the funnel on a month by month basis,
Yeah.
grow there when you need to grow, pull off when you don't need us. And I really do think that we're going to see 10 times, 100 times, 1,000 times more companies than we see today. I think lead to a lot of opportunity for all of us to be able to service a lot more companies out there.
Yeah, I agree with you. I never thought about the perspective of having just more 1,000 person companies. I think, and you hit it, I think on the nail on the head right there. I just don't see how I'm even looking at my team right now, and not to be doom and gloom to my team, but in 10 years, I think I will be at the same size, just augmenting with some technology as well.
Sure. Yeah, your company could be 2 to 3 times the size, and you could give job security to all of your recruiters, augment them with AI, allow them to do more than they're doing today, and still
Yeah.
have that stability. And ultimately, what I see, I call my new community talent grind because from my perspective, recruiting is a grind, right?
Yeah.
It's a grind profession. It's got a low barrier to entry. It's got like HR and sales dropouts. It's easy for people to get in. It's a grind, but it's the best job in the world, right? Like when you're able to change people's lives, you're able to change companies. It's a win all the time. And I just think that there's It should be more stability over time. There should be more opportunity for all of us over time. And so I'm definitely not an AI doer. Right.
I'm value there. For sure.
Yeah. And so are you experimenting with any AI tools in your process currently?
So now at the moment, we have a couple things that we're working on that we're quote unquote call AI at the moment. We are Our resources are really tied into improving our ATS at the moment, which is promising us to have AI in it once we're updated to their new UI. But I think we will start seeing that start coming in the next couple months for us as a company. I know our IT team is experimenting with AI on their side and seeing how that can help with our operations side, with the engineering side as well.
I'm curious, is your company open to recruiters just using like an LLM like Claude or ChatGPT just for messaging and kind of non-confidential, not proprietary things? Or are you taking like a let's hands off for a bit and then we're going to come in as a company?
So our company is a Microsoft company. All of
Ah,
our suite is Microsoft. So all of our recruiters have co-pilots set up on their computers. So
perfect.
they can go in there and create that. We also use Hire Easy. They have internet AI as well aspect to their messaging. So from that standpoint, we are from going in, ranking candidates, job description creation. We're not at that point yet, but we are hoping to be in the next year or year and a half.
Yeah. Shout out to the Hire Easy team. I was actually one of the first 20 users of Hire Tool. And I worked
Really?
with their, yeah, I worked with them in their early stage. It was interesting. I was at Dropbox at the time and I brought in to do recruiting operations and they found out how good I was at sourcing. And so then they just started to have me source. And I was like, oh God, like, I'm good at sourcing, but it's just not my favorite thing to do in the world. And I think I found Hired Joel through Product Hunt and I signed up for it and I started paying $80 a month. And I just started recruiting circles around every other recruiter at Dropbox. It had the full LinkedIn suite. And so I could see if any profile had ever been looked at by any recruiter at Dropbox at any point in history. And I was finding managers and directors at FANG companies that had never been looked at by Dropbox before.
Wow.
Everyone was just like, how are you doing this? And of course, at that point, I wasn't telling anybody. This has set me apart. Now I look at it, and and I had a conversation at the time with Arvin KC. He's now chief people officer at Roadblock. He was at Palantir at the time. I met him at a networking event, and I asked him when machine learning AI was going to replace a recruiting coordinator, and he said something that just stuck with me. He said, Michael, it's not about that. It's not about replacing the coordinator. It's about allowing them to do 10 times more than they can do today with 50% less stress. And I was like, oh, and I think that's when I really started to understand the impact that AI was going to have and put me on the path to building my own products. And so I'm really glad to hear that your team uses Microsoft Copilot and they've got access to all that function and feature because I certainly know I use Claude and it's
Yeah.
absolutely invaluable to me. Like I can't imagine not using it, at this point. Do you think that there's any specific recruiting tasks that AI can't replace?
If we talk in the grand scheme of things, if in 100 years, can it be replacing things? Yes, I think a lot of the human interactions that we're having with candidates, maybe on the executive side with candidates, I think it's going to be the hard one to be replaced. We can have those chatbots that talk to most of the candidates, but I don't think closing candidates, AI is going to be good at doing.
I completely agree with you here. And I say that to people all the time. If there's one thing that I know when it comes to making career decisions, it is such a huge part of people's lives. It's an
Yeah.
intimate part of people's lives. It's how you're paying the bills. It's how you're keeping the roof over your head and keeping your family fed. And I just don't ever envision a future. I can see maybe for high volume recruiting, entry level recruiting. I remember one time I had a project with Aon Hewitt. We had to hire 500 people to become licensed insurance salespeople in 6 months. And we had to overhire by 30% in case people flunked out at the school. And it was just a madhouse. Like we were going to churches, we were going to community centers. We would have big events at Aon where they brought all the executives in. We would have 50 people interviewing people. We would be giving offers on the spot after a 20 or 30-minute interview. And now I look back at that project and I probably could have managed that with AI and 3 recruiters now.
Agree.
Yeah. And so while there might not be as many recruiters in companies, if we go back to what we said before, but there being 100 or 1,000 times more companies, it should lead to a lot more opportunity for everybody. And so I guess just, and I think that's a good point for everybody about efficiency and communication. My podcasts have been generally going anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes, but Brian and I are communicating so well with each other. I've written through my list of questions here. I think we've jam packed it full of really information, a really interesting information. What advice would you give to someone perhaps who's just starting in recruiting right now?
Kind of to what you said earlier, it can be a grind, especially when you start. I remember when I started in staffing, it was just all about always picking up the phone and calling people and messaging people. Give it a shot. It's very rewarding every day, every week. I'm happy with what I'm doing. And also learn the industry. There's so much you don't know about the industry. I'm learning about it every day. I mean, you can learn anything from early careers to employee branding to recruitment marketing to sourcing. It's almost endless with the possibilities of things that you can become really good at within this industry. Go out there, learn as much as you can, go out to different communities and try to learn, go to conferences, learn from your community as well at this conference. These are all great places to learn from industry experts already.
I could agree with you more. I think what I love most about recruiting, I'm a student of business, right?
Exactly.
If you take a look at traditional company organizations, at least from what I've been able to say, most executives from companies come out of two different areas, sales or finance, right? Sales or finance, right? And maybe to a lesser extent, operations, depending upon the business. Out here in Silicon Valley, you would throw engineering into that mix. But what I've been trying to push is I really feel that the best CEOs of the future are going to come out of recruiting. And this is why, because nobody knows a company better than a recruiter. They're in the guts of the company. They know the hiring managers. They know what the priorities are. They know what all the different roles are. They're hiring all the people. They're salespeople who've been raised in a very regulated, compliant environment. And that to me is just a winning combination in terms of what I would look for in an executive in a business that I own and ran. And so I'm trying to get recruiters to realize we don't have to be the ugly redheaded stepchildren anymore. Like we offer value. If I had $1 for every time somebody said, well, recruiting is just a cost center. It's yeah, but you wouldn't have a company without the people in it. Obviously, sales drives the bus, right? Sales is much more difficult than recruiting, but from my perspective, recruiting is the more rewarding career out of all of them.
Within recruiting, you get to learn what makes everybody tick within the company, why somebody is in their role, why they come to work every day, what makes them passionate about what they're doing. That is just amazing in itself. When I get to sit down and talk to somebody about what they do on a day-to-day basis and just see the passion light up their face, that's actually the part that I enjoy the most.
Yeah. And a little pro tip, if you're a junior recruiter, when you're interviewing somebody, if they say something interesting that you want to know more about, probe for it. They don't know if you're doing it for the interview or for your own personal knowledge. And I've done that all along. Oh, that's interesting. Tell me more. And I've gotten really good over the years. Like I can identify nuggets where
Yeah.
like something has just been battle tested. There's been about 20 or 30,000 iterations on it, right? And they just got it down perfect. And you hear it and it sounds true and you recognize it as true. And you're like, oh, wow, that's hard earned wisdom. I can't think of any other profession out there that gives you insight into that knowledge like recruiting does.
I don't know anybody else that's going to talk to as many people.
Yeah, absolutely. It just building relationships
Agree.
and going back to AI, ultimately, I think just for the capstone on that, I really feel in what I'm on a personal mission to do is like right now we're for all information workers, we're in this cycle where we're spending 80% of our time doing nitty gritty work, sourcing, verifying email addresses, doing, all the messaging, all the outreach, the whole interview process. And we spend 20% of our time actually interviewing people, building relationships. And I really do feel AI is going to inverse that. And we're going to spend so much less time doing that nitty gritty type of recruiting work that none of us really enjoy, but that's important to get the job done. And spending a majority of our time actually building relationships with people. And I just think what a wonderful world that would be. And if and when that happens, like how almost transformative and healing that could be for the world when you have more people who are just building relationships, but at scale, 100, 500, 1,000 times more relationships than you have today. And you can work with an AI to manage those relationships and build them over time.
Yeah. You talk to more people and not do the quote unquote grunt work of our profession. I think that would be amazing as well. I completely agree with you.
If you could change one thing about the recruiting industry, what would it be?
The negative impression I think a lot of people get when you say you're a recruiter, um, because most recruiters do care. I think most people do care about it, but they've been burned by that one person, and our entire industry has been burned by it. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. I would say this there's no challenger sales method for recruiting yet. There's no training in recruiting yet. That's what I'm bringing to the conversation. I think it's super important. And I think the final question that I have for you is what keeps you, I've been a recruiter for a while now. What keeps you passionate about it?
a lot. There's so much in this industry that I keep learning and learning. And tomorrow might be a different day than Thursday. Good quality company and bringing those people in and trying to figure out how to be more creative and have our message of our company different than anybody else within the recruitment industry or even our competitors. And that's what I really enjoy. I still love the aspect of getting candidates excited, talking to them about the role, having them come in, talking to our hiring managers. And then since I've left staffing and come into the corporate side, one thing I really enjoy is now seeing the hiring managers get excited when they're like, oh, thank you for finding that person, or a peer of this person I just hired saying, thank you. I don't have to work overtime anymore because I have somebody that's coming in, or we're going to meet this project deadline. That's the part that I really enjoy is now just seeing that sense of gratification from people.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a really tough VP one time, and I still remember I filled his role. He sent me an email and he's like, Michael, I wasn't easy on you, and you went out and did exactly what I wanted you to do. Good job. And I was just like, you know,
Yeah.
like that's all I really need. We don't get positive reinforcement that much. And so if you're a non-recruiter watching this and you work with recruiters, give them positive reinforcement. We're kind of whipped animals at this point. Like a little bit of love goes a long way for us. And donuts or cookies, if people are working in office, sugar is always a good addition as well. Well, listen, Brian, like we ripped through a half an hour here. I got through all my questions. It's been so interesting learning about you and your background and your experience. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of the earlier career recruiters who are going to get a lot out of this conversation. I just want to thank you so much for joining us on Meet My Network. And I hope that you have a great day. Thank you so much for joining us. Bye.
Thank you.